Greetings everyone, welcome to another music history crash course. Let me give you a heads up on today. We're wrapping up the life of Beethoven today, and today's lecture is going to be long. And your listening excerpts, particularly the last one, are going to take more time. However, because of that, the next lecture that I'm going to do tomorrow, lecture 15, you can skip that one. Yeah, you're welcome to listen to it if you'd like, but it's totally optional and there will be no quiz questions from it. But you do need to listen to the excerpts from today because you will have quiz questions on those. The last excerpt that I'm going to ask you to listen to, you can play it as background music because it's going to take you 25 to 30 minutes to listen to. Or you can just listen to that tomorrow in place of the lecture, whatever you want to do. But just plan that this is going to be longer, and that you can skip lecture 15 if you'd like. So let's wrap up the life of Beethoven. Here we go. All right, so by the early 1800s, Beethoven is an established composer, and we're moving into his second period of music here. His reputation by now is on par with Haydn and Mozart, and he was so well loved that when Napoleon's younger brother tried to offer him a job, the nobility of Vienna came together and basically said, we will pay you an annual salary for the rest of your life if you just stay here in Vienna. So Beethoven was doing pretty good financially, and he was a bit better with his money than Mozart was. Publishers were competing for his music, and like Haydn, Beethoven would publish his music in multiple countries simultaneously. He was a very methodic writer. He only wrote 9 symphonies compared to the many that were written by his predecessors. But his symphonies were much larger. They were of a much larger scale. So we get to 1802, and we're just about to enter Beethoven's second period of writing. And Beethoven is starting to have to face the fact that his hearing loss is not getting better. It's actually getting worse, and it's likely to be permanent, and doctors just aren't able to help him. So, one of his doctors encourages Beethoven to go to Heiligenstadt, which is kind of a country village in Vienna, in Austria. And here, Beethoven spends the summer, and he really wrestles through what he's facing, and he pens this beautiful letter called the Heiligenstadt Testament. He's also doing some composing, but he writes this letter that was never sent. It was meant to be opened after his death, which it was. And I'd like you to read through it in its entirety. I'm going to have another slide here that's got the whole letter written out on it. This is the original here on the screen. You can either do that, or there's a great YouTube video that I have in your playlist if you're using the YouTube playlist, which is being narrated and set to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, which was written around the time that he penned this letter. So again, either read it on the next slide or listen to the narrator, but I want you to read it and understand what it is Beethoven's wrestling with, why it is he chooses to keep going, and why he chooses to not commit suicide, which is something he's wrestling with at this time. So read it and then come back and join us. It's incredible to see a musician that was just wrestling so much with being ashamed of losing his hearing, because in his mind that was the most important sense that a musician could have. But it's also so beautiful to see how he determined that God had given him a gift, and he was determined to keep using it until he had expressed all the music that he needed to, and that's what kept him from committing suicide. So just an incredible letter. You see here in the bottom right, this is his residence at Heiligenstadt, where he would stay during the summer. Let's move on, though. So from this experience, we start moving into what's called Beethoven's heroic style of writing, and his Symphony No. 3 exemplifies this. It's called Symphonia Eroica, or the Heroic Symphony, and you can hear writing that sounds like wrestling with darkness, but you can hear hope that prevails. He uses really dramatic chords. Dark, stormy minor middle section, a very triumphant conclusion, and that's all just in the first movement, which is in sonata form. For more info on this, I would highly encourage you to watch Michael Tilson Thomas's Keeping Score video on this. It's free on YouTube right now. It's put together by Michael Tilson Thomas, who's the current director of the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, and it utilizes them playing this piece, and he walks you through the history of Beethoven writing it and the meaning behind it, and you can watch it for choice points, just saying. But it's really, even if you don't watch it for choice points, it is worth watching. Fantastic. Anyways, so Beethoven originally was going to dedicate this to Napoleon, and then Napoleon decided to crown himself emperor, and Beethoven wasn't on board with that. So you can see over on the left is the image of Beethoven's original cover for this, and it says Sinfonia Grande, and it's supposed to say Bonaparte there, Napoleon's last name, and Beethoven was so passionately upset that he scratched Bonaparte's name out and literally tore the paper. That's Beethoven for you. What I'd like you to do, I want you to listen to the first movement of this symphony. You're going to hear dramatic orchestration changes. You've got this big full orchestra and then suddenly these little collection of winds. You're going to hear dramatic changes in volume or dynamics. You're going to hear these great melodic lines that soar and then they sink. You're going to hear Beethoven's trademark obliteration of the downbeat through his rhythmic writing. It's going to sound like the time signature is changing, but it's not. He's just literally accenting weak beats and doing funny things with the rhythms. You're going to hear long codas or tails, and you're going to hear long bridge materials between themes. And again, this symphony, it's a standard arrangement. The first movement is fast, the second is slow, there's a dance movement, or scherzo, and then a fast movement at the end. And the first movement is in sonata form. So can you identify the exposition, the development, and the recapitulation? So I'd like you to listen to the first movement of Symphony Number 5, and then come back and join us. Did you hear that early horn entrance when the recapitulation was coming in? That was intentional. That wasn't a mistake on the horn parts player. Though during an early rehearsal of this, one of Beethoven's students nearly lost his head for asking why the horn player couldn't count. And Beethoven was like, nope, he came in exactly where he was supposed to. You're an idiot. So, you might have heard in the opening theme that it kind of went up and came down, but then it ended on kind of a strange note. Da 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 da. You hear this like weird syncing to a C sharp there? Musicologists argue that this is one of the ways Beethoven was portraying kind of a distrust in himself as he was wrestling with his deafness, but you hear by the end of this movement that that C sharp disappears. Da 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 da, and it just hangs out up there. This is supposed to kind of represent triumph for Beethoven, wrestling with his the demons inside. This piece was initially received with mixed reviews because it was just long. Some thought it was a masterpiece, some thought it was taxing. But within a few years, most people kind of softened and recognized it was brilliant, and all right, this is the direction we're going with symphonies. Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies in all. His 5th one has a very recognizable theme that I'm sure all of you know. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, a very recognizable opening. And that rhythm happens to match Morse code for V, or victory, hence its association with victory in World War II. And here again, Beethoven's writing in a triumphant, heroic manner. He's taking us from C minor, this kind of dark, stormy place, to C major by the end. So if you get a chance, take a listen to this, and you'll hear, again, his writing describing triumph and perseverance. It's really amazing. His 9th symphony, which we're going to look at, gave birth to one of our most beloved hymns. And Beethoven did successfully write one opera, Fidelio, but it wasn't until his 3rd revision of it that it took off. And so he decided he wasn't going to be an opera composer. But again, he expanded what the symphony meant, greatly increasing its size and depth, and he did the same thing with concertos, which gave greater importance to the soloists in his writing. He continued to write piano music, including his famous Für Elise, though there was no Elise in his life. It was probably for a lady named Therese, who was one of the ladies he proposed to. She turned him down, and either his handwriting was misinterpreted or it was a pet name for her. We're not really sure. Optional listening. You don't have to do this, but take a listen if you'd like to the first movement of Symphony 5. You can also listen to that Für Elise piece if you're not familiar with it. And listen for that overcoming by Beethoven. And you'll hear more of Beethoven's trademark styles, including those syncopated accents that throw off the rhythms. So, if you want, take a listen, but otherwise, let's go on. Now, Beethoven, besides his one opera, also wrote vocal music, and he wrote this song cycle for vocalists, which was made up of a bunch of romantic Lieder, German vocal songs. And these were very romantic, very passionate, and these are about love unrequited. A song cycle, which I do want you to know this term, is a series of songs that are meant to be performed together in a row, in succession, and all together they tell some kind of a story. Now this song cycle was written in 1816. This is a few years after he's written his immortal beloved letter, which is this letter where he's like, I'm never going to get married, I'm never going to, oh, I love you, but we can't be together. Which, as far as we know, was never delivered. It was discovered after his death. But he's acknowledging he's not going to get married. He tried a couple different times and was rejected. He's also struggling to raise his nephew Carl. When his brother died, he ended up with custody of his nephew, and the wife didn't, and he and the wife were not on good terms. His raising of Carl didn't go well. In fact, ultimately, when Carl was, I think, late teens, and he was trying to live independently, and Beethoven was very controlling of his life, in 1826, Carl attempted suicide. Wasn't successful, but he did. So, you look at Beethoven's life, and it's just filled with drama, deafness, struggles with family, struggles with raising this kid, yeah, he had a lot of material to write sad songs with. So these are the original sad boy songs. I mean, yeah, we saw some stuff with troubadours earlier on in the Renaissance, but these songs not only are sad lyrically, but the way they're written musically are just, they're going to tear your heart out. So, what I'd like you to do is listen to at least the first of these in this song cycle. The text, by the way, is by a German poet named Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, whose work we're going to see in other Romantic era Lieder. The translation of this first song, you have it here on the screen. On the hill I sit peering into the blue, hazy lands toward the faraway pastures where you, beloved, are found. Far am I from you, parted, and we're separated, pain, hurt. Yes, there's additional songs in the middle that use metaphors of winter and spring, and then the final song uses a metaphor of birds reuniting after winter and dwelling together to make a home. And the final line of that one, this is the last song in the cycle, when all that loves the spring unites, only though to our love no spring appears, and tears are our only consolation. So listen to this first song in the song cycle, Auf dem Hügel sitz ich spähend, sung by Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, who was a leading baritone for German lieder in the 20th century. This piece is strophic, which means you're going to hear a melody that repeats, but new words are added in on each verse. So take a listen to this first song from this song cycle, Auf dem Hügel sitz ich spähend. Now, An die ferne Geliebte, that song cycle we talked about, comes to us from Beethoven's late period of composing, which, as we said earlier, was filled with more technically challenging music. Beethoven wasn't writing for just commoners to play music anymore. He wasn't writing for the masses. He was writing for professionals. Even the one mass that Beethoven wrote, his Missa Solemnis, which Missa is Latin for mass, was so large and grand it was ultimately performed as a concert and not as part of a church service. So Beethoven's Final Symphony, number 9, he finished this in 1824, and like many of his other works, it stretched the attention span of audiences like no symphonies had before. Remember Symphony 5, which was about 40 minutes long, which was twice the length what audiences were used to? So the 4 movements of this symphony take over an hour to perform, and the last movement alone, takes 30 minutes to listen to approximately. And it's what I'd like you to listen to today. It combines chorus, operatic soloists, a German poem called Ode to Joy. There's several things I want you to listen for. First, the introduction. It's tumultuous. There's instruments with solos, kind of like opera recitative. You're going to hear them exploring lots of themes before they settle on the joy theme. And you're going to recognize that theme. You can almost hear as they're doing this exploring, the string bass will be like, they'll play this kind of like gentler melody that almost is like, no, that's not the theme, no, that's not the theme, and then you hear the winds play this theme, and everybody's like, ah, that's the one. And then the orchestra explores the theme, starting with the basses, then you add bassoons, and then you build up, then tumultuousness comes back, then a bass gets up and he sings this recitative where he's like, not these tones, rather sing joyfully. And then a choir sings Freude, which is German for joy. Schöne, Gott hat Funken, joy, beautiful, divine spark. Another theme shows up, sung by the chorus. Zeit umschlungen Millionen, be embraced on millions. Then there's a double fugue. You remember fugues, which where there was like a melody, and then there was an answer that went along with it, while the other one did. So you had a subject. Sorry, you had an answer that went along, while the subject then moved to a counter subject. And so picture all that, but have two of those things going on, kind of overlapping each other. There's a crazy coda, remember that's the tail, the chorus and soloists. It's just this massive work, and this addition of chorus and soloists was kind of Beethoven's acknowledgement that the music world was really shifting its priority towards opera, which we're going to see a little bit in the Romantic era. So this is a long excerpt, but I want you to listen to it either today or tomorrow in place of this presentation. This is movement 4 of the 9th Symphony. So take a listen to this. Again, you can skip lecture 15 tomorrow if you'd like, but make sure you listen to this excerpt and enjoy it because it's absolutely incredible.